Lembras-te daquela música Spring Day dos BTS?
Não.
Quando reagimos aos 100 vídeos mais vistos, apareceu uma música e tu comentaste sobre ela, sendo que nunca reagiste aqui no canal, e disseste certinho que aquela era sobre. Que eu até fiquei, como é que as gajas sabem?
Como é que se chama?
Spring Day.
E de primavera? Aquele sobre o. Aquele acidente que me roubou da gelo.
Agora explica-me como é que tu sabes isso, eu nunca te mostrei.
Porque já me contaste coisas sobre isso.
Já?
Já, e eu tipo fiquei com a melodia da música ou assim qualquer coisa. Pelo nome não foi lá, só que estás a ver. Pelo nome não ia lá mesmo, só que então. Pela melodia da música não se lembra.
Ter falado sobre isso.
Ou ao tempo, aos anos, já mesmo. Anos.
Sim. Então pronto, hoje vais reagir.
Tu já nem sei o que aconteceu.
Ao videoclipe, vais reagir ao videoclipe.
Mas ainda tu o que é que vai ser na música?
E vais.
O que é que vai ser na música? O que é a música na cabeça?
E vais reagir à explicação do que é que aconteceu dessa tal história. Tipo, não tem nada a ver com Kpop, mas há uma rapariga que tem um canal no YouTube que posta assim bué vídeos, tipo, a explicar acontecimentos. A Maria até são da Coreia. E ela fez um vídeo a explicar isto. O vídeo tem 2 horas, só que eu editei e pus para 1 hora, porque eu já sei que, né? Tu não tens assim a capacidade para 2 horas.
Não, tipo, se fosse por partes.
Não, eu só quero gravá-la toda uma vez. Então tirei.
Aquele chocolate vai ficar ali a apodrecer. Já está ali há 2 meses.
Tentei tirar algumas partes e meti legendas em inglês.
Pois eu não percebo inglês.
Não. Eu não te disse a falar com uma brigadeira armas em inglês. Bué, Tiago, sou mesmo bom em inglês.
E foi.
E agora?
Ele disse que era bom, ela que disse. Ele disse que era muito
então
bom.
Explica-me como é que consegues...
Ela não disse que eu era muito bom, ela disse que eu sabia falar.
Explica-me como é que consegues falar com uma pessoa durante horas em inglês e não consegues ver um vídeo em que até tinhas escrito, se não percebes o inglês.
Mas tu não sabes que eu estou a gozar, tu estás a mudar a conversa porque...
Eu não tinha em português, porque senão dava muito trabalho, não estou a ficar em inglês mesmo, e assim até praticas o teu inglês. Primeiro vamos ver o vídeo a explicar, que assim quando fores ver o videoclipe já percebes melhor, acho eu. E pronto. Eu não estou a dizer, porque o vídeo tem 1 hora, ele vai explicar muito bem o que é sobre, né? Então não adianta estar aqui.
Mas envolve os BTS com alguma coisa? Não.
Os BTS fizeram uma música sobre isso.
Sim, mas antes. Tipo...
Não, foi simplesmente algo... É uma história um bocado chocante, tu vais ver, porque literalmente eles mataram estudantes porque sim. Porque eles podiam ter salvá-los, mas não podiam salvar. Ela vai começar o vídeo a falar de um navegador que mergulhou depois para tentar recuperar os corpos. Já estavam mortos, mas pronto, para trazer os corpos. Então o início começa assim, porque senão tu vais ficar, o que é isto? Pronto.
E porquê que ela começa assim a meio?
Não é meio, ela tipo, começa isso, é tipo uma intro, estás a ver? Para começar a história. Será que eu vou buscar fotos? Diz-me, achas que vais ficar chocada? Achas que não vais?
Não,
achas
quando fico chocado com nada.
É verdade. Mas há uma história real, tu
Não,
lembrar
hoje,
disso.
parecia que tinha um montão de som e o qual eu gosto tipo andar de carro, não é? Eu passava a pagar
Mas não é isso que vai ser chocante.
Mas
Eu vou-te explicar.
não percebi mais nada.
Isto não é gráfico, não é nada.
sei.
É só simplesmente tu ficas. Porquê?
Mas não fiquei com o Titanic.
Tu nem viste o Titanic?
Mas sei a história.
About this Sewol Tragedy, the sinking of the Sewol boat. Now, 2 16-year-old students from Tanwon High School, they made headlines. There were some rumors that they were dating. There were some rumors that said, no, they were just close friends. But most of the students that knew both of them personally said they barely knew each other. I don't even think that they had a class together. Most kids said that was the extent of their interaction, just passing each other in the hallways. Yet the 2 of them found each other alone in a room, in a boat, terrified. I mean, they're watching the water starting to pool on the ground and they didn't know what to do. Sure that they were trying to comfort each other. But eventually, everything goes black. A civilian diver would later find both their bodies alone in that room, and their life jacket cords were still tied together. He remembers how he had to separate them because he physically couldn't bring up...
Só vai ser assim uma vida toda lixada.
Foi só uma palavra, meu Deus, que eu não consegui ler sequer.
Estavam 2 corpos juntos.
Sim, eu percebi, mas ele falou... tipo, ele teve de separá-los juntos.
Teve que esperar para poder trazer acima. Eles sim, amarraram.
Era isso que eu estou a saber, amarrar o quê? É isso que eu queria saber.
Life jackets.
Lá está, eu sei, eu não tinha conseguido ler a palavra sequer, ela fala rápido.
Por isso é que tem as legendas.
E as legendas acompanham o que ela fala. Se ela fala rápido, as legendas também vão rápido.
Na verdade ela não fala rápido, eu é que acelerei um bocado, porque senão o vídeo ia também estar grande e tu ias reclamar, então olha.
Oi? O quê?
Uma cor.
Quanto? só agora. Isso é por isso que ele já caiu há bocado. Olha esse.
Kiko, deixa ser Cusco.
Olha ali.
Eu vou tentar resolver o problema.
Mas tipo, qual foi o ponto importante de tipo, dizer se eles eram namorados, amigos, não se conheciam?
O
Só
ponto
para dar
importante
impacto?
é mostrar que eles nem se conheciam, mas não queriam morrer sozinhos.
Ah, sim, tipo.
Bodies at once, and he recognized that in their last moments, maybe these two kids knew each other, maybe they didn't, but in their last moments, they didn't want to be alone. So they tied the strings of their life jackets together till the very end. And he said, I started crying, thinking that I didn't want to separate them, but I had to. Other students from the same high school, Tanwan High School, faced similar fates. A female student was seen throwing a chair at a window, a glass window, and she's hurling this chair with as much force as she can muster. It would just clunk onto the window and fall back down. She wasn't angry, but there was just pure desperation in her eyes. She could see on the very other side of this window were rescuers. They saw her, she saw them, and they did nothing but stare at her.
What? Why?
We're gonna get into it. I mean, this rescue, I don't even think you can call it a rescue. She realized that these people, these rescuers, they're not here to save her. All the people that she thought would be responsible for her safety, the captain of the boat, the rescue teams from the Korean National Coast Guard, they all abandoned her. They were watching her through the window, and it was very clear to her in her last moments that she was being left to die. April 16th, 2014, the Sewol Ferry capsized off the coast of South Korea. There were 476 passengers. Most of them were high school students around the age of 16 years old from the same high school. They were on their way to Jeju Island when their boat started sinking on Wednesday.
Sim. Porque, e também foi deste caso, eles foram lá de visita de estudo, né?
Acho eu.
Pronto, agora estás a dizer, isso faz muito lá na Coreia.
Eu acho que fiquei nessa parte, por aí, da série.
And when a giant boat that carries 500 passengers, when it starts sinking, it's not something that goes unnoticed, nor is it something that happens very quickly. Soon, nearby boats and vessels and even countries start giving out lending helping hands. The Japanese Coast Guard asked if South Korea required assistance because they were right there. The U.S. Navy had a massive vessel stationed nearby and offered to rush to the scene to help with rescue efforts. South Korea denied all of their requests. They told news outlets that they had everything under control, that they were operating a full-scale rescue operation, and that majority of the passengers had already been rescued off the boat and they're being rushed to safety.
Wow.
South Korea told the world, hey, guys, these are our kids, and we're going to do everything to save our kids. But that could not have been further from the truth. The Sewol Ferry Tragedy in South Korea would lead to the deaths of over 250 high school students, over 300 lives.
Eu ia perguntar agora mesmo quanto é que morreu.
Não precisas fazer perguntas, ela explica tudo.
Eu por isso que eu não quis perguntar, porque eu já sei que ia ter.
Total. It would lead to the president being impeached, the prime minister resigning, the Korean Coast Guard being disbanded, multiple high-profile arrests, a billionaire suspicious suicide, a helicopter crash, hunger strikes, and a vice principal of a high school found hanging from a tree in the woods, dead. So let's get into the tragedy. The parents of Tanwon High School are getting bombarded with calls. Phone calls, text messages, voice memos, pictures are being sent to them. And it was like a parent's worst nightmare. Think about your 16-year-old kid aboard a boat on a school field trip, and they're sending you cryptic text messages like, Mom, I'm sending you this because I'm scared I might not be able to say it later. But I love you. And you're like, whoa, what's going on? You're like on a field trip. Another kid sent, hope we can meet again alive. Another student said, if I've wronged any of you guys, please forgive me. The parents start freaking out, but they're told by their kids that, hey, Mom, Dad, the boat is sinking, but rescue efforts are on their way. I think everyone's got it under control. They told us to stay in our cabins and put on our life jackets. Many parents told their kids, okay, well, stick with your friends. Don't be alone. Don't wander out alone. And good, that's good. They have everything under control. Just keep calm and do what they say. If you listen to them, everything will be okay. These words will haunt the parents forever. A lot of them couldn't even face living with the guilt because so many children would die from listening to what they said. The ferry sank April 16th of 2014, but the story starts the day before on April 15th of 2014. So the students at Tanwon High School, this is like their annual trip to Jeju Island. They considered it a rite of passage, like a tradition for everyone. They're so excited for this because, for one, their parents aren't going to be there. It's just their class and a couple of teachers. And I mean, just imagine the adrenaline and all this planning that goes into something like this. Any inconvenience that day that would have otherwise bothered the crap out of them, it didn't bother them anymore. I mean, they were waiting in line for hours at the port of Incheon. Jeju Island is like the Hawaii of South Korea. And would get on a boat, go all the way down the left coast of South Korea, and then get into the ocean, the Yellow Sea a little bit, and then they'll hit a tiny little island called Jeju Island.
Eu não consigo perceber, eles saíram da capital.
Provavelmente.
Que estico!
Acho que era 12 horas ou 9 horas. Ela vai dizer também.
Isso era todo barco, não é? Pois, porque ela
Yeah,
vai dizer, podia, sei lá, tocar ou um avião.
Também o problema não foi tipo aqui a meio, estás a ver? Eles estavam muito perto de chegar quando o barco afundou, por isso provavelmente teria sido.
It is the biggest destination spot for South Koreans. It's beautiful. It's like a cultural mecca. There's so much, there's a lot of fun stuff to do there. So these kids are like, yes, Jeju Island. Even when their ferry is delayed for 2.5 hours because of foggy conditions, they're like, that's fine. Are you kidding? Nothing is going to ruin this trip. It takes 14 hours. But thankfully, they would be going down the coast of Korea most of the time, the left side of the coast. So they're going to have cell service. You know, and it was outfitted like a cruise ship, meaning that there's dorm rooms with bunk beds, there's communal showers, a convenience store, a cafeteria, you know, which for high schoolers, this sounds like a blast. There were 476 people on board the ferry, including the crew. Now, they board the ferry at 9 p.m. They were supposed to board 2.5 hours earlier, but like I said, a delay.
You're saying there's not only people, but also like vehicles on there.
Oh, so many vehicles, and it's actually a cargo ship. This is a cargo ship that loads on passengers on the side. Here is it before it sank.
Oh wow.
It's
Like a cruise ship.
Yeah, like a cruise ship.
Yes,
Wow.
it's massive. Now, the night of the 15th was pretty calm. Okay, so this is a picture that the kids posted or taken by one of the victims. Just of them boarding during the foggy night. Dinner is served, there's fireworks that are launched from the deck, and there's pictures of that too. At night, the passengers, they all go to sleep in their cabins. They all go to sleep around 11-ish, and the next morning, at around 11 a.m., they should be arriving in Jeju Island. 8:20 a.m., autopilot is switched off to manual steering. Autopilot off, manual steering on. Just 7 minutes later, this Sewol is sailing through the Mangor Channel. Now, the Mangor Channel is very pertinent to this story. There are other routes to take to get to Jeju without going through this particular channel. I mean, it really only saves like 7 miles off of your trip, but this channel is... It's not some sort of urban legend where ships go missing and it's like a terrifying place, but it's not calm. It's not that safe, it's a little unpredictable. It is actually has one of the most rapid and unpredictable currents in the Korean peninsula. But Sewol was traveling through a part where it was pretty calm, conditions were relatively calm. 8:49 a.m. 2 crew members that were in charge of steering the ship decide to manually steer the ship 15 degrees to the left, which is a well-known fact to all crew members aboard this Sewol that they cannot steer this particular vessel more than 5 degrees in any direction. So why did this Sewol ferry even start to sink? This Sewol was known, like I said, to be a cargo ship. 25% of their profits were just from passengers. So being incredibly irresponsible and greedy, they would almost every single time load way more cargo than was legally allowed. It caused massive dangerous conditions on the boat, and when they made this sharp turn, which is supposed to only be 5 degrees to the left, they went 50...
Que nem ela disse, era o capitão, supostamente deve ser, não sei se os outros também podem mexer ou não. Então basicamente eles viraram o triplo do que era permitido.
Mas não foi só isso, houve muitas merdas mal que eles fizeram.
Degrees, and none of this cargo, none of these cars, they had almost 200 vehicles on this cargo ship. all of them slam to the left
Oh my God.
because none of them are being tied down.
Explica-me como é que tu confias em meter o teu carro num barco com mais 200 carros sendo que eles não estão amarrados.
Era o que eu estava a dizer, tipo...
Eles vão cair uns em cima dos outros, chegas lá não tens carro.
Opa, estava aqui em turma de mal, mas tipo... Imagina, estamos nas zonas...
E ela acabou de dizer que eles foram todos para a
Sim,
esquerda.
foram todos para a esquerda, eu nem estou a dizer, mas isto foi porque ele mirou demais, mas até andar normal, tipo, sempre em frente reto, com as zonas, e lá se lavamos, tipo.
The cargo had been tied down. It probably might have balanced the boat back out. Now, even if it didn't become stable again, there is something called ballast water. Did you know most boats are filled with water? It sounds counterintuitive, but it's something called ballast water, which is
That
just
makes
to bring the
sense.
center of gravity, right?
Yeah.
They had like no ballast water. The center of gravity was at the top of the boat.
Why? Oh, so they can load more cars.
Yes. So there's no way that this
Oh
boat
my
is gonna
God.
fix itself, balance itself out. No way. All of this cargo, all of these vehicles slam to the left, and this boat is not gonna balance out. This boat is 100% going to capsize, meaning it's going to sink. Now, the water is very cold in April. It was about 54 degrees Fahrenheit. It only takes 10 minutes for you to start feeling the effects of hypothermia. You're not gonna die in 10 minutes, but most of the time. But you start feeling loss of dexterity, your fingers go numb, you're starting to, your teeth are clattering, and full-blown hypothermia happens after about 2 hours. So right at this moment, the boat leans, and the engines of the boat are cut. The off-duty captain, Captain Lee Chun-seok, he starts running. He's like, I gotta figure out what's going on. Some crew members also run to the bridge of the boat, and they're like, what's going on? Now, they're trying to assess the situation, and when a boat this size starts to list or even starts sinking, it's not like an earthquake. It's gonna jerk up and go, we need to evacuate this boat. It feels dangerous, but it almost feels like turbulence on a plane. You feel like, okay, I need to wait it out, and it's gonna be fine. 8:52 a.m., just 2 minutes after the boat starts leaning to the left about 30 degrees, an emergency call is made by a student, Choi Tok-ha. Choi reported that the Sewol was starting to capsize. He was the first 911 call. He was one of the few that understood the severity of the situation, and he was probably confused because he could hear the speakers on the boats. Do not move, just stay where you are. It's dangerous if you move, stay where you are. Every single student and passenger was told to stay put. And now, all hell breaks loose. Crew members are calling so many different people. There's the Jeju Vessel Traffic Service, Korean Coast Guard, Jeju Coast Guard, Mokpo Coast Guard Station, their company executives. There's so many different people that this communication system is just bonkers. The fact that they don't have a system in place of like, if an emergency happens, this is who I call, is crazy to me. Nobody was getting anything done. So much time initially is wasted in these key moments. At 9:07 a.m., the crew confirmed to authorities the ferry is capsizing, and they confirmed that they needed help from the Korean Coast Guard. They stated the ship's angle made evacuation impossible. Now, here's where it gets crazy. Allegedly, none of these authorities knew that there were 500 passengers on this, well, close to 500 passengers on this boat. That's what they claim. I don't believe it for a second. They're like, no one told us. We just thought it was the crew. We
Como
thought.
é que uma visita tão grande, num barco assim tão grande, não é? Tipo, ninguém sabe como vai
Isso é
ser
que
uma
ela está a
coisa das
dizer que não se
pessoas.
acredita, é que foi só uma desculpa.
Pois, tipo, é um bocado estúpido. E mesmo assim, é que correu. Imagina, se eles passam carros, ok. Se o navio virar, virou. Pronto.
Morrem ao
Agora-
menos os responsáveis.
Morrem os responsáveis e vão os carros à vida, mas agora com o povo, eles não tratam de, se calhar. Opa, isso até devia ser aquela parte da água, para o balanceamento. Devia ser uma regra obrigatória para um barco poder partir.
E é. Mas
Não sei como é que eles passaram, há uma inspeção antes.
ela vai falar também mais à frente, mas esse barco já tinha acontecido muitas cenas antes. Mesmo assim. Porque quem a empresa que controlava isto era de um milionário, então. Né?
Quanto
Faz o
mais,
que querem.
é a coisa, quanto mais tem, menos quer gastar, supostamente.
Também.
Ou menos quer, ou faz o máximo possível para ganhar mais ainda, né? Porque supostamente foi para levar mais carros.
Sim.
Coisas.
It was a cargo ship. Get out of here, because the Sewol was well known to be a passenger cargo ship. So they say the ferry is about to roll over. It's not even sinking just to the bottom like this. It's going to be completely inverted. The bottom is going to be the top. The Coast Guard tells the crew on Sewol to inform any passengers, if there are any, to put on their life jackets. But they just say, oh, sorry, our PA system is down. It wasn't down. It's just bizarre. Now, the Coast Guard is like, okay, well, if it's down, then go personally tell the passengers. The crew member is like, okay, I'm gonna do that. He walks out of the command center and walks around a bit and comes back being like, I did that. He did not do that. He just lied. So the passengers up until this point are still being told to stay where they are and do not move. And some of the very first people rescued was the captain. and a few of his crew.
그러나 구조당국이 가장 먼저
Deve ser os últimos, supostamente.
É.
O capitão tem sido sempre tomar abandono no navio.
E ela vai dizer, mas o pior é que ele fingiu que não era o capitão. Então nem deu informações sobre o navio nem nada.
Está no navio.
Sim, está todo lá.
구조한 사람은 배를 버린 선장과 선원이었다.
The captain was rescued by one of the small Coast Guard boats, and he wore ordinary clothes to disguise himself as a passenger. But he was rescued at a point where it wasn't just utter all hell breaks loose and there are people drowning and dying right now. He's like, okay, well, I think chaos is about to hit, so I'm gonna leave.
That's so fucking despicable.
Yes. Yeah, he's actually one of the most hated people in all of South Korea. He disguised himself as a passenger, and once he was rescued, this is even more despicable. He gets on the
Eles
Coast
não
Guard
tinham
vessel.
botes, tipo, fala disso. Não é colete, é botes.
Parece que não.
And he doesn't let anyone know that he is the captain and that he has vital information that would help them in rescuing passengers. He doesn't relay any information to them when time and information is the most important thing to save lives. He made no attempts to tell them how many passengers, where they were, what the PA system was doing. He did none of that. He didn't tell them that they were being told to stay in their rooms where they were effectively trapped inside this sinking boat. None of that. There is about 20 minutes of footage from some of the kids' last moments. And one of the biggest, I guess, video files that were actually shared by the father of the victim. And he said that he wanted the world to know what actually happened to these kids. So it was filmed by a Park Soo-hyung and Kim Dong-hyuk. They were both 16, best friends. They were both on the level 3 of the boat, which is where most of the male students were dorming.
아 기울어졌어. 야 나 좀 살려줘. 이거 상황이 아니야 이거 진짜라고. 와 기울 줄은 상상도 못했다. 이게 뭔 상황인지 모르겠어. 구명조끼 입으라는 건 침몰되고 있다는 소리 아니야?
The video footage from these students are stitched together to be about 20 minutes, but it's probably the most raw footage I've ever seen in my life. Like, it's not necessarily the most emotional in the typical sense, meaning these kids aren't crying, they're not banging on the windows to get out, but you just see how real and relatable the situation is. Like, the way that these kids, at first, they don't think the ship is gonna sink, because who thinks that? You know, they're kind of joking around, but they're putting faith in the adults and the captain and the PA system, and they're kind of playing around with each other, and I find that it's a way that they're coping with it. And then eventually you hear that humor kind of dissipate, and it gets replaced by them saying, I don't want to die. But they're still trying to keep this almost cool front in front of their friends. You can hear other kids trying to check up on their friends and contacting their family members back home on their phones. But near the end, you can hear and see most of them start to feel very, very scared. You hear students say things like, will the water really leak in? The shaking is getting serious. It's tilting so much this way, I can't even move. This is getting ridiculous. I want to get off. I really want to leave. Am I gonna die? It's not gonna go down any further, right? Like, what the hell is going on? Hurry
Até
up.
mais podia ter salvado se a indicação fosse para eles ficar onde estavam, né?
Sim, ela vai dizer que a maioria da razão deles ter morrido se calhar foi isso. Eles foram
Eu
obrigados a
cagava,
ficar.
eu ia lá para cima.
A cena é que, tipo, pronto, não percebes muito bem, mas na Coreia tem muito esta cena de hierarquia. E tipo, se as pessoas mais velhas dizem para ficar, eles ficam.
Sim, não sei, mas opa, nesse caso.
Sim,
US, what's wrong with these people?
mas eles achavam que ao sair ia tipo, sei
Fazer
lá,
pior.
desequilibrar o barco, cenas assim, estás a ver? Eles estavam a acreditar.
What's happening? If they're telling us to wear life vests, does that mean the ship is sinking? Near the end, one of the students even screams, "Let me live, who's gonna take care of my mom and sister? Let me live." And now, all throughout this, you hear the PA system in the back. Dear passengers, a guidance announcement. Those of you who are inside the ship, please do not move.
Who's talking in the system?
just it's like an automated message.
Oh,
Yeah.
nobody's even like
No.
talking.
Oh yeah, no. Most of the crew are like, bye. It's very heartbreaking because you just hear that playing while these kids are repeating, we don't want to die. Another student can be heard saying, really, once the water starts coming in, we really got to get out. And another student says, no, like, it says we shouldn't move. There are a few things to gather from the students' last moments. They're trying to stay strong. They're trying to keep each other company. And if you listen and you speak Korean and you listen to the whole clip, a lot of these kids are thinking about their families, or a lot of them are asking, wait, has anybody checked on the girls on the other floor? Or has anyone checked on the teachers? Like, trying to see if their friends and even their teachers are okay. Some of them were joking around that this was the Titanic and sang the theme song, which I saw a lot of like old people be like, what's wrong with kids? But that's how they cope. They followed the rules. They followed the advice of the adults who they believed were doing the right thing, so they stayed put. They trusted the captain. Even teachers were going around dorm to dorm to make sure that these kids didn't go. One student texted his mom, please, if I don't survive, Mom and Dad, I love you. Another one texted his parents, Mom, Dad, younger sister, I love you guys so much, and please don't ever let my little sister go on a school trip ever. These are some of the kids' last words. They also noticed that some of the zippers on many of the life vests were broken. Not only that, but one of the boys said, I just discovered something really horrible. This life vest says it was made in 1994. Here, look, it's written in the back. They didn't even have enough life vests to go around. So a lot of the kids were sacrificing life vests to each other and to their friends. They were asking if the teachers and the girls all had life vests. The videos were captured on Kim Dong-hyuk's phone, and he would not make it out alive. So while this is the situation inside the boat, mainstream media at the same time, like imagine this is happening at the same time. Please, just the irony of all of this. Mainstream media starts reporting that all passengers have been rescued. There were reports that all passengers were rescued. Tanwon High School parents let out a sigh of relief. Oh my god, okay. That cryptic text, my child is fine, they're probably not responding to my texts or my calls because they're probably on like a Coast Guard vessel right now and they're busy, but that's fine.
Eles mandam assim uma cena para fora, vai tipo, foram todos resgatados. Se calhar foram tipo que assim? Nem isso.
Nem isso. Eu, tipo, há boas coisas questionáveis aí.
E tipo, por norma, as cenas da Coreia são todas tipo organizadas, tudo funciona bem. E aqui falhou tudo. Polícia, tudo, tipo.
Olha, nem sei, nem sei explicar. Eu acho que tipo, o problema principal é que eles não sabiam lidar com o problema, não sabiam o que fazer em caso de emergência, estás a ver?
Mas isso ainda preparo antes, não é?
Pois, mas eles não queriam pagar preparo às pessoas, né? Custa dinheiro.
They start noticing something fishy though. They're trying to get in contact with their children, no responses. They contact other parents and they're like, no, we also haven't gotten any responses. And when they watch the news very carefully, the numbers aren't adding up. And it's not like some sort of conspiracy, but the government would report that they rescued all the passengers. Then a little bit later, they'd be like, okay, well, we have rescued majority of the passengers. Then it'd be like, oh, and these are not the exact figures, but it would be something like, we rescued 200 passengers. And then later they'd be like, we rescued 150 passengers. So which one is it? Who are you rescuing? How do you unrescue people? So frustrated, the parents, they start traveling to Chindo Island. Now, Chindo Island is the closest island to where the crash happened. The parents all decide to use the Chindo gym to be their coordination place. And I truly don't even know how to explain what I'm gonna say next. But first of all, the people organizing this gym to make sure everyone is in the right place were the parents of the children on the boat. They arrived, there's no organization, it's chaos, so they take it upon themselves to make sure everything is organized. Not the Coast Guards, not the local officials, the police, the parents take charge. The rescue teams had these giant...
Que era para ver os que tinham sido resgatados.
Sim, os pais foram todos...
Sim, isso eu percebi, isso eu estou a querer ler o que dizia aí.
Whiteboards on the front with a list of names of passengers who have been rescued. And of course, parents are flocking and praying and wishing that it's their child on the list. But these families are getting frustrated.
여기 명단에 분명히 제 동생이 있어요. 여기 명단에 분명히 제 동생이 있는데 동생이 여기
Percebeste?
Então eles metiam também nomes de quem diz eles resgataram.
Sim, ela está a dizer que o nome da irmã dela está lá, mas a irmã dela não está lá nenhum.
Por que eles põem os nomes?
Talvez para tipo amalçar os pais, tipo acalmar, sei lá.
지금 명단을 누가 작성하셨냐고요?
So these are authorities being like, here's all the people we rescued, and the parents are like, we don't believe you because where are our children then?
상황이라도 좀 알았으면 좋겠는데 상황이 지금 모르니까 지금 불안해서 어떻게 할 수가 없대.
Another parent screamed, please, just get us a boat so we can save our kids. Get us a boat. We don't care how much it costs. I will pay for it.
가서 우리 애들 부모에게 배를 하나 구해주세요. 배를 하나 구해주세요. 전부 다 돈을 얼마든지 드릴 테니까.
최선을 다하겠습니다.
배도 안 보인대요. 경찰들만 놀고 있고 아무 그거 없대요 지금. 잠수가 없고 지금 그런 상황이거든요.
지금 뭐 얘기로는 지금 뭐 CC도 많이 꺼냈다고 하는데 지금 가요 가.
Another one said, I feel like the parents, including myself, are here waiting for our children to die. We want an answer from the person in charge. Why are orders not going through and nothing's being done? The parents are rushed to the harbor, and to show you how they still had this unfailing hope of a parent, they all grabbed blankets on the way out. They said when their kid gets saved, they want to make sure that they have something to keep them warm. They all go to the harbor and they wait. There's nothing that they can do.
Eu lá há bocado a pressão de que é, mas eu não consegui apanhar.
É tipo. Quase. Não é bem porto, mas é. Fica perto da água, estás a ver? Então eles ficam ali tipo à espera.
Side note, police were lined up at the edge of the harbor to prevent family
Guarda,
members
não.
from going
Não é
into
que é uma
the
maca, eu esquece.
whether to try and rescue a kid or to in a desperate attempt. A parent screamed, I want to jump in the water with them. My loved one is under the water. Anger is not enough. If I don't have my younger child, I'm going to jump in the water thinking about my child in the water. How can I as a parent continue to live, eat, and drink? I hate myself. Someone near a mom tried to put one of the blankets on one of the moms because it was so cold, and she cried, what good is it staying warm when the kids are freezing out there?
우리만 따뜻하면 뭐하냐고요. 애들이 추운데. 애들이 추운데 우리만 따뜻하면 뭐하냐고.
Wait, this is nighttime?
Yeah,
It's been a day?
it's been a day. We're gonna go back into the rescue. Just you wait. These are some of the most devastating clips I've seen. I mean, just the desperation in these parents, like their grief, their worry, their anger, and so many of them it's a lot.
진짜 가보자. 기자들도 당신들도 타고 현장을 한번 가보자. 제대로 된 정보를 여러분한테 좀 알려주라는 얘기예요, 내 얘기는.
So let's talk about the rescue, because you mentioned, like, how is this nighttime? So the rescue that government officials and media said was a success was not a success at all. The Coast Guard helicopter was dispatched to the sinking ferry at 9:10 a.m. They arrive at around 9:30 a.m. 2 rescuers come down and rescue 6 passengers via helicopter. And these passengers were, like, on the deck. So they're, like, waving. They're visible. They're outside. Now, at 9:32, the helicopter starts communicating with the Blue House. And the Blue House is like the White House. And they keep asking, is the situation serious? The helicopter says, the ferry is tilted and currently being flooded. It hasn't sunken yet. Can you please send over a video? Now, this is being heavily criticized because time is of the essence. Keep calling back to the helicopter, not giving commands.
Parece que eles estavam todos. Ai, só mandamos mesmo se for mesmo quase a tombar. Até lá, nada. Tipo, outros mandassem, é mesmo? Tipo, qualquer merda, não é? Tipo. Se fosse um país sem poder económico, porque aqui já se trata também da parte do governo, não é só do, não é?
Tanto que ela disse no início que o primeiro-ministro despediu-se ou algo assim e o presidente não sei o quê.
Sim, eu vi.
Not doing a full-scale command center operation, but going, did you send the videos yet? Just nonstop, over and over and over again, wasting time asking for videos. And what's even crazier is that the helicopter is like, well, we didn't want to take any videos in case it gets leaked. But the Blue House is like, it's fine, text it to my phone.
지금 현재 지금
E aqui não tinha mandado nada.
Não.
지금 기후라도 침수 중이고 아직 침몰은 안 됐고요. 카메라 나오는 건 없죠? 네, 아직 없습니다. 예. 예. 현지 영상 있습니다. 예? 현지 영상 볼 수 있는 거 있습니까? 본인 내 외부로 나가지 않아도 되겠습니다.
Soon after this, the Coast Guard patrol vessel 123 arrives at the ferry. They throw over a raft and they head to the ferry to start their little rescue. Just anytime I say rescue, don't think of it as a rescue, think of it in quotations because it's just a bunch of people acting busy. The first people to step into this rescue raft are the captain and crew members. The Coast Guard, the vessel, distances itself from the ferry and they try not to enter the ferry, get close to the ferry. They don't try anything. Meanwhile, there's about 3 helicopters that are just circulating, that are just loitering the area, watching.
What's the deal? What's the problem then?
No one's giving them any commands.
So they're all clueless on what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
And the captain is like just staying silent.
Yeah.
Basicamente não estavam todos à espera que a Blue House lhes dissesse
Estás
salvem
parado,
as pessoas. Mas tipo, se tu estivesses no helicóptero,
Mas será que isto não
a cena não é.
Será que isto não podemos usar muito? Num helicóptero tinha de ser era
No
com
mínimo,
barcos.
no mínimo, helicóptero conseguias 2 ou 3 pessoas.
Sim, lá está, mas tinha de os barcos todos, tipo...
E já tinha lá barcos, já ela disse. E tu
Tinha
viste.
de mais, para 500 pessoas, não é?
De qualquer das formas, se tu estás num barco vazio e estás a ver as pessoas a afundar, tu ficas ali à espera que alguém te mande e resgatá-las em vez de resgatá-las.
Claro que não. Resgatava logo, até se fosse um barco de civis, tipo...
Porque a questão é, eles tinham medo de quê? Qual ia ser a tua penalidade por salvar alguém?
Blue House is like, well, we can't tell you what to do unless we get a clear HD 4K video. So everyone's just waiting around. And what's crazy is that there was a US Navy vessel that was nearby that rushed to the scene and they're like, hey, we can help. And the US Navy is
Okay,
so
so-
equipped. This vessel
Porquê está lá um dos Estados Unidos?
Tipo, estava lá. Calhou de estar um navio perto, então ofereceu ajuda.
Lá, acho que já fez mais que...
Ofereceu, mas foi recusado.
Foi aquele disse antes, e também do
Sim.
Japão, não foi?
Sim, eles recusaram.
had 100 Marines on there. South Korea was like, it's fine, we're waiting on a video.
Mas aqui, então já nem se trata da cena de gastar dinheiro. Aqui já seria que
Aqui
era
é
uma
um-
parte mais de orgulho, exatamente. Ainda por cima que tinha 100, pelo assim...
Mil, ela depois vai corrigir. 1000. Era 1000.
Eram 1000!
The government shut them down?
Yeah, the government was like, it's fine, we're handling it. US vessel, the Navy vessel, actually had helicopters on the vessel and they had launch pads. So basically, they didn't have to go back to land to bring survivors. They could just go back and forth to their vessel that's parked very close.
Tipo, ainda por cima, eles não tinham que ir à terra, podiam ir barco a barco.
So they could save an insane number of survivors. I mean, the resources of that US Navy vessels, like I said, multiple helicopters, landing decks of the helicopters, over 1,000 Marines ready to assist in air, sea,
Ok, 1000, ok.
Sim, eles-
rescue.
1,000?
1,000, sorry, did I say 100?
You say 100.
1,000. The rescue could have been so successful, and these Marines are specifically trained in air sea rescue.
No way.
The Korean Coast Guard, they were more like patrol people. They patrol to make sure that there's no illegal fishermen from other countries fishing in their seas. To sum it up, the rescue teams were just rescuing anyone that comes to the deck where you can visibly see them, but every single passenger was told to stay in their cabins. One helicopter Coast Guard
Ainda por
officer...
cima, tipo, se eles não sabiam que tinha tanta gente, e se eles só estavam a resgatar quem viam, mas toda a gente estava a ser mandada a ficar dentro, eles achavam que tinha lá ninguém. Se calhar.
Lá está, também a cena é... Se fosse noutro país, se fosse Estados Unidos, estávamos um bocadinho cima já.
Sim.
Por aquela coisa do sucesso,
Sim,
respeito
foi muitos fatores aí, incluindo cultura e tudo.
Sim.
Even during an interview, complains, you know, rescue's hard.
Estás a ver como a educação aqui não foi boa? Um bom ponto.
Because you tell a person that you're rescuing to watch their step, and they don't watch their step, even if you tell them to.
옆에서 말을 해도 안 되면 하물며 보통 올라갈 때 조심하라고 자세 차라니까.
그러니까 그 사람들 지금
Eles estavam a falar com um que estava a resgatar pessoas e ele começou a dizer: porque isto é muito complicado, porque tu dizes, mete o pé ali e eles metem o pé no outro lado. Tipo, o trabalho dele, o que é que ele está a reclamar?
우리는 입장에서는 제주에 있는 확인해야 되는 인구가 근데
물어본 것 같아. 근데
Blue House is still asking for videos, and the only people that do something to save human lives. Do you see all these little boats? Those are civilian boats and fishermen.
Lá está,
They are-
civis não é?
The ones that took action. They are risking their lives, pulling up straight next to this capsizing, ginormous ferry. And it's very dangerous to get that close to a boat that's capsizing, especially with boats like this. And they're pulling people out of the water. One of the fishermen, Hyun, in the blue boat, he said he saw the boat listing to one side from afar, and he realized that it wasn't balancing itself back out. So he rushes over, he starts rescuing passengers that were jumping into the cold water, and he said it was hell. It was agonizing. There were a lot of people, not enough boats. The people in the water are yelling for help. The ferry was sinking fast. He said he had no idea of how many people he saved, but he was told he saved about 25 people. He said, but I don't know for sure. The people that were trapped inside the ferry couldn't come out. They were just trapped inside the ferry. If everyone was saved, maybe I would feel proud of myself. But there's grieving parents out there, so how can I feel proud? Even though he's one of the civilians saving passengers while the Coast Guard is doing nothing, he lives with guilt for not saving everyone. What's frustrating is when the ferry starts to list, if the captain had ordered everyone to put on a life jacket and get to the dock where they're visible, the likelihood of every single person surviving was incredibly high. So one thing that you notice that's a problem is that they don't want to be the ones to make the call. They don't want to be the ones held accountable, so
A
everyone...
cena é que, pá, está bem, depois ali virar uma luz e iam ter de ir ainda aí água, mas pá, mesmo assim era melhor que ficar lá no fundo preso, tipo, porque antes eles ainda estavam com os coletes, ainda podiam boiar, foi como ela disse, acho que tipo, aquela água te entravas em 10 minutos e para o termino, mas só morrias passar para aí 2 horas.
Dependendo da pessoa e das capacidades da
Sim, exato, para muita coisa, mas tipo, lá está, era muito melhor.
Pushing responsibility onto each other, and that's what resulted in so many of these different vessels and helicopters just waiting around while people are dying. But there are heroes in this story. So, do you remember the first emergency call made was by a student, Chue?
Mm-hmm.
He stayed on the phone with emergency services, trying to give them the exact location of the sinking ferry.
So then they should know there's kids in there.
Yeah, exactly. He tried to give the exact location because, again, I don't know why this was such a problem. I don't know how they didn't know where the exact location was, but remember the 2.5-hour delay? I guess they were thinking the boat was closer to Jeju because they didn't factor in the delay, but they were closer to Chindo Island, so it was a mess.
Então eles nem informaram que o coisa partiu depois.
Basicamente. É o que eu digo, muitos erros, tipo, demasiado.
Pá, é assim, por exemplo, eu sei que toda a gente sabe que no aeroporto aquelas são comunicações, né? Há autorizações para partir e tudo. Que num porto não funciona igual, mas essas autorizações não é tudo apontado.
Nunca entrei num código barco que me faça mesmo, mas imagino que deve haver, ainda por cima, navios deste tamanho.
Lá está, tipo, é bocado duvidoso.
And Chue, he was sad that he wasn't able to call his parents. The information that he was able to provide to authorities was very crucial. Chue's body was found, and his parents were really confused because, you know, a lot of these other kids, they all had cell service and they called their parents, but they never got a call from their son. They were later told that he was the one on the phone with emergency services. While Captain Lee and a few of the other crew members escaped, there were some crew members who refused. Park Ji-an, Chung Hyun-sun, and Kim Gi-won, they stayed aboard the ferry to help the students. All 3 went down with the sinking boat.
Eles estavam lá para salvar o mais crianças e morreram também?
Young was the youngest part-time worker of the crew. She was just 22 years old. I mean, she's barely older than these high school students. 2 years prior to this, her father passed away and her mom didn't have enough money. So she dropped out of school and started working. She was one of the first to have an easy escape. She was like near the dock. She could hear the kids though, and the PA system was still telling them to stay put. So she runs to the ship, took off her life jacket, gave it to a younger kid nearby who didn't have one. And like I said, she's basically a kid herself. She starts stumbling, running as fast as she can through the halls and yells for the students to evacuate. She's handing out life jackets. She tells them to jump ship. She guides some 50 students to the civilian fishing boats who lift them out of the water and into the boat. One survivor remembers grabbing Park's arm and saying, okay, just come jump in the water with us. Like, you don't have a life jacket, but I'm gonna hold your arm. And she said, after saving you guys, after saving the rest of them, I'll get out. Crew goes out last. And then she just disappeared again to save more kids. She kept going, and the last time someone saw her alive was going deeper into the water where it was already chest level to see if there were more students. Her body was later found floating face down. Still no life jacket. Even in her last moments, she never wore one because there wasn't enough life jackets for both passenger and crew. 2 other crewmates, Chung Hyun-sun and Kim Gi-won, they refused to escape with cowards. They wanted to save the kids. Chung and Kim also could have been very easily rescued, but they decided to go back down and help the children. They were both 28, and they were actually getting married later that year to each other. Their bodies were later found as well, and they had spent their last moments saving children. These 3 part-time crew members would formally be recognized by the government as national martyrs. Young Dae-ong was another crew member that went down with the ship. He's 45 years old, and he called his wife, and he told her, this is where you need to find the savings for our teenage son's college tuition, okay? And when she tried to plead with him, he told her, I love you, but I can't talk. I have to go save the kids. His body was found a month later, and his face was unrecognizable, and there was a walkie-talkie found near him. Soo-young was a young teacher, and it was her second...
É diferente, foi muito mais longe, foi Não foi perto de nenhum.
E águas muito
Águas mais
fundas.
geladas, sim.
E fundas.
E também era outros tempos.
É uma aranha.
Oh, não é na ponta?
Yeah.
Não é.
Não é?
Não.
Não era nenhum.
Year teaching at Tanwan High. She was very young, and it was her first year on the school field trip. When the boat started sinking, she texted her mom, "Mom, the ship is sinking." Her mom called her and was like, "Hurry, put on a life vest." And she responded calmly, "Mom, the students are all wearing life vests," indicating there weren't any more for her. She texted her boyfriend after this and said, "I'm sorry. There's no more life vests. Thank you, and I love you." And he calls her and she says, "I can't, I'm sorry. My battery is low and some of the students still need to call their parents." Her last words were, "I love you, thank you," to her boyfriend. Another teacher was Ko Tangsuk, and Mr. Ko was a PE teacher. Oh my god, this picture. This is the PE teacher. He was a PE teacher for the last decade, and at his
Era coisa dizer, physical education.
old job before he got to Tanwan, there was actually a fire in the school, and he was given like an award by the school because he ran in head on into the fire to save students from the burning fire. He also went down, and I mean, there was no question what he was gonna do. He was gonna save the kids. He left behind a loving wife and 2 sons. His body actually wouldn't be recovered until 3 years after the incident. There was a memorial service.
3 anos depois ainda foi encontrar os corpos.
Ela vai falar da cena de encontrar corpos, porque eles também, tipo, não ajudaram a salvar os sobreviventes e depois também não ajudaram a ir buscar corpos. Basicamente, ia quem queria, tipo, voluntariados, estás a ver? E não tinham segurança nenhuma, tanto que acho que até um morreu e outro partiu uma perna, assim, estás a perceber? E por isso é que demorou tanto tempo, porque, né, quem é que quer se meter lá no meio?
For him, and a student came and said, "Mr. Ko could have escaped early, but he stayed to take care of us until the very end." So these are all heroes. There's another story, though, on the boat where a 6-year-old girl, this reminds me of Itaewon, but a 6-year-old girl was there with her parents and her 7-year-old brother. So they were part of the passengers that were going on vacation to Jeju. She was passed one by one from adults to the water to one of the fishermen's boats, all the way. Her parents and her 7-year-old brother would all perish. Everyone worked to get this girl to safety, and she would be the youngest survivor of Sewol. Now, civilians were the only hope for these children because of the government, the authorities, they were doing nothing. Like I said, most of these boats saving these people are civilians, fishermen, commercial fishermen, just regular citizens, not government workers. But many civilian divers who saw the news said they were gearing up to volunteer as rescuers. These are like professional divers who have been doing this that want to volunteer to save these kids, right? They're coming from Seoul and all these places, but then the news starts flooding that everyone has been rescued. So they're like, oh, okay, I guess I don't have to go? And it wasn't until hours later there were these like rumors and these kind of like fishy things that these volunteer divers were even picking up on. Because, you know, these were people who know how to dive, and the way that the news was reporting these rescues just didn't sound right. Many of the civilian divers, they volunteered and they started arriving at around 4 p.m. that day. The boat started sinking at like 9 a.m. So these volunteer divers, they don't come to play. They're suiting up, gearing up, mentally preparing themselves, but the Coast Guard is not letting them do their jobs. One of the civilian divers said it was bizarre. I was being walked around this Coast Guard vessel. Like, come here, let me introduce you to my colleague. Oh, and this is my captain here. Oh, and then this is my senior colleague. What did you say your name was? How long have you guys been diving? Do you want to come to the cafeteria? They prepared ramen. This is not an exaggeration.
I'm confused. Like, they're not sending people down the water?
No. That's what they're doing, just tip-tapping on their laptops. The ramen was even brought into the conference room for these chiefs to eat, and the diver that was
Ok, não fizeram nada, como os outros disseram, os Estados Unidos, eles trabalhei vocês, molestaram, se calhar aí o orgulho.
Mas aqui não é orgulho sequer, porque são próprios coreanos que querem ajudar. Não é?
É orgulho que o governo tem tudo resolvido, tudo controlado.
That he wished he could have recorded the video of these chiefs just digging into these noodles like pigs. They said they ate the ramen noodles, had a meeting for 5 minutes, and then the chiefs were like, well, we got other places to be, so bye. So the parents, now remember how the parents wanted to rent a boat to go out to sea for themselves and to save their children? Well, the very first day, a group of the parents do rent a boat, and they go to report back to the others what's going on. And one dad screamed, they told us civilians can enter the water, but the Coast Guard can't. Basically saying, oh, you want to dive in and get your kid? Dive in and get your kid, but we can't. A reporter asked a parent who saw the ferry sinking and said, and what are the Coast Guard doing right now? And he says, as of right now, there's nothing they're doing. April 16th was the morning the boat started listing, okay? Now, at 10:52, reporters went out to the scene and still nothing was being done. 10:52 p.m. A whole day had passed.
Like 14 hours later?
Yeah, and nothing was being done. Let me show you how calm the waters were.
You're saying 14 hours later the boat's still sinking?
Yeah, it's still actively sinking. So what happens on these boats is time is of the essence. Of course, the golden hour was the first hour and a half that the boat even started listing, way in the morning at like 9 a.m. Now, the next golden time was considered the next 72 hours because there's actually a phenomenon that's quite common where there's air pockets inside of boats. So these divers need to go in and...
Eu pensei nisso, tipo, mesmo quando as coisas lá está, tipo, até se costumam falar câmaras de ar, que são formadas, estás a ver? Já houve um africano até, não sei onde que ele ficou lá, e até tem câmara dele assim encontrado lá.
Eu vi.
Water has seeped in, which is sometimes possible. You're alive. You have about 72 hours. So these divers need to get down there and hope that there's a lot of air pockets. Do you see how it's dark? Where are all the Coast Guard vessels? Where are the divers? This should be lit up like a command center. This should be lit up like the 4th of July. This is what it looked like. It's the most peaceful water. There's no waves really. Nothing. No one's out there. During press conferences, the Coast Guard made it seem like it is pure chaos out there with our rescue efforts. We've got how many ships, how many people? I mean, imagine the anger of the parents seeing that and they can't do anything for their children. They were yelling at their boat to the Coast Guard, do something. They screamed, they're alive, you have to rescue them. The Coast Guard never responded. All they did was circle the Sewol Ferry over and over.
What's their excuses now?
They said that they had to survey the area. That's the thing that they constantly say in this whole tragedy. They needed to make sure they could go in. The Korean Coast Guard was not trained for search and rescue.
They can't dive in and pull people.
So they're like, we're probably gonna die. So they were allegedly just telling the Blue House, whatever you're suggesting we do, we're not capable. We can't do it.
Then where's the capable people?
But they didn't say we're not capable. They're like, conditions won't let us. A lot of these politicians, it was like a balancing game. They want help, but their reputations depend on them not asking for help. And none of these Coast Guard officials wanted to be the one to do it. Because there's 5 different Coast Guards. There's so many people involved that they're like, well, let's just see if they do something. Because we don't want to do it. Because what if we do it and we f it up? Then it's on us. So we just wait. Yeah, the parents are screaming, what are you doing? You need to do something. Get in the water. It's so heartbreaking because a dad on the boat tries to jump into the water and everyone tries to stop him. And what's crazy about this is that the Coast Guard official documents report that they were doing underwater rescue efforts at that exact time that the parents are out there watching them. But all they did was get on a little boat and circle the capsizing ferry. At one point, one of the Coast Guards drives up close to it and just knocks on the ferry. It's like, a parent who saw that said, I can't believe I was inches away from my child and all I could do is helplessly watch him die. Did you know at first the parents were allowed a boat out there by the Coast Guard and it was filled to the brim with mainstream media news reporters? There wasn't enough room for parents. The parents forcibly kicked them out. Next day, April 17th, it doesn't get any better. There is still no control tower, no organized operation. So the president and the prime minister, they visit the area in Chindo Island where the parents are gathered. The parents said they stood there and they watched the Coast Guard point at maps. They watched the politicians in suits go, It was like watching people pretend to do a job. It was like watching a skit. They felt like they were losing their minds. The Coast Guard is saying things that they know are not true, like, oh, we worked so hard last night to do underwater rescue. Now, at that moment, the prime minister shows up at the Chindo gym, and he's second in charge to the president in this country. I guess nobody informed him that the parents are not in the dark on all of this, that the parents are not going to be like, thank you, Prime Minister, for your efforts all night long. Because I think he walked in expecting some things and questions, but instead he was chased down and had water bottles thrown at his face. Open water bottles, which I think is symbolic in hindsight. In the end, police protected him and escorted him out. President Park Geun-hye also visited with this whole entourage of security and politicians. She stated, I just went to the rescue team and I want to assure you guys all the government mobilized all resources and personnel to retrieve the victims. The Coast Guard chief also goes up next to the president and claims that he has sent 500 divers to the rescue. The parents know that this is a blatant lie. They are enraged. They start screaming at
ainda mantiam a dizer que fizeram o que tentaram e que
Porque
mandaram
eles se
X
calhar
pessoas.
achavam que os pais não tinham ido à beira do barco e que não sabiam.
Note, there's video of this, and President Park doesn't even seem surprised that the parents are screaming at his lies, almost as if she knows very well herself that those are blatant lies. That was the whole second day of the rescue. The second most valuable day. That's how it went.
Que ela é que a reação após o gajo dizer quantas pessoas mandaram?
E toda a gente a dizer
E aquele olhar de lado.
Third day, April 18th, a lot of developments took place and none of them were good. The Sewol Ferry was now fully submerged. Parents went out and they couldn't see the boat anymore and they cried. Government also let a private company step in for rescue efforts. A company called Undyne started to lead the rescue attempts, but it was more of a recovery attempt. It was like a half rescue, half recovery. So there's still a chance that you can live 72 hours in an air pocket, but it was guesstimated that most of the bodies being retrieved would be dead, so it'd be a recovery attempt. Now, they sucked. Undyne sucked so bad. The idea from the get-go was the Coast Guard, or someone, since the Coast Guard is useless, would inject air into the Sewol Ferry. This is going to help with multiple things. It would hopefully improve its buoyancy, and this is very important because if the boat is fully submerged in water, it's going to start sinking, and divers cannot be in there when it's sinking to the bottom. So they need it to somewhat still be near the surface of the water, makes it easier for rescue or recovery. And if there is human life, injecting air could help those air pockets survive longer. And Undyne comes in with these massive air compressors. They're old. They're industrial use, not compatible with human life. Meaning if you injected this into a room, you'd probably kill the people in the room. Again, the US Navy was nearby and offered their assistance once more. They said, we have new compressors, and we also have qualified professionals that utilize these compressors and have done rescue efforts such as this one. They were denied. This day also marked the first...
Mas que eles sozinhos ficaram lá o tempo todo, basicamente, também. Não estava a ser qualquer coisa.
Não, acho que este era outro que tinha passado.
Ou não interessa, mas os Estados Unidos são mesmo.
Assim, recusar uma vez já é mau, mas duas é aborrido. Há mais.
Or recovery of bodies. 3 bodies were recovered by civilian divers, but mainstream media said all of it was...
Então, ela disse que agora 3 corpos foram recuperados, mas possíveis.
Sim, e eles disseram que foi pela empresa, Undyne. Mas acho que eles já vinham...
Undyne recovered these bodies, and that makes me so mad because these civilian divers gave up a lot to help. They were not part of the Navy or the Coast Guard. They were moms and dads, corporate employees, professional divers in other industries. They were stay-at-home parents. The only thing that these divers had in common was that they liked to dive, they were good at it, and they wanted to help people. So they left their homes and their families to drive to this southern part of Korea to do the most important dive of their lives. Many of these civilian divers would end up permanently injured, paralyzed, traumatized, depressed, and some would even lose their lives because of this dive. They told each other, minimize shock when you're down there. Shock is no good for anyone. The divers all made a pact to not look the students in the eye. Because once you do that, you will never be the same, and it will make it harder for you to go back down underwater. They talked about how it was the hardest thing. The ones that drowned, they would have to recover their bodies, right? So their families could put them to rest. But there was so much debris in the water, because think about this big ship. There's so much things falling apart. Walls were collapsing, and the hallways became narrower than your shoulder width. A lot of them had to squeeze through hallways. Bad weather delayed the use of a diving bell, so they had to use these super flimsy, flexible air hoses. But if they're twisting and turning in there, it could easily snap, break, or it could be folded to a point where they're not getting air anymore. It could get caught in things. It was very, very dangerous. They had to go down in teams of 3, and they would never forget the things they saw. There were bodies in life jackets floating around in the ship now, and the divers had to reach up, grab the bodies, and hug them so that they wouldn't keep floating up. They would find a window that they could break and get rid of all glass and debris. Then they would carefully push the body through the open window so that they could float to the surface. If a body was found without a life jacket, 2 divers, one diver would have to wrap their arms around this dead body, and the second diver would have to pull them through a rope to the surface. The divers said they found...
Pois é que, mas eles tinham... É sério como eles conseguiram partir do baixo estava. Mas
eles
tinham que ter qualquer
equipamentos,
coisa.
não é?
Imagina, o pessoal cá em cima à espera, de repente, top, um corpo.
Eu não dá para fazer isso.
Tipo...
Nenhum desses, nem ir lá abaixo, nem ficar cá em cima. Caramba.
Many of the students hugging each other, holding each
Opa,
other.
eu até no episódio está cá acima, mas agora lá abaixo eu como tenho um bocado a cena de empurrar a focada.
Às vezes nem é água, tipo, sei lá. É tipo
E
espaço.
claustrofóbico
Também claustrofóbico. E ver corpos assim.
A minha cena é tipo um claustrofóbico para mim, esquece. Eu como não consigo aguentar muito tempo, mete mais impressão, estás a ver? Está bem que cena dá, mas ali não é que seja muito uma grande cena. Nada.
Or tied together. They said how hard it must have been for those kids. With the cold water rushing in and the darkness coming over them, I thought to myself, why did I even offer to volunteer with this if I can't even save one life? Most of the students had broken fingers. They tried till their very last moment to break the doors or windows to escape, breaking their fingers in the process. After seeing this, a lot of divers would never be the same. Kim Sang-ol, one of the civilian divers, said he was at home when he watched the news and his diver buddies called him up and was like, you need to get here now. We need to save some kids. So he drove hours from his house in Seoul to the southern coast. He spent 2 months away from his family, risking his life to squeeze into these small openings, these dangerous conditions, to find bodies. They worked in 3-hour shifts.
He did it for 2 months?
2 months.
What is it?
3 hours of rest,
In
3 hours of diving,
Wait,
3
what
hours
time,
of
huh?
rest. But like the other divers, he was having a hard time resting no matter how exhausted he was. The stress of the dives wrecked his body. The anxiety wrecked his body. Finding these water-bloated corpses of children, he said he could never get that image out of his mind and he had nightmares anytime he closed his eyes. He said we were touching each of these children with our bare hands as we brought them up. Even now, I can't hold my wife or children. I can't stand skin. In addition to the psychological trauma he has, he suffered a shoulder injury that needed surgery. So while he was diving, a luggage compartment in the Sewol broke open and massive luggage tumbled straight onto his shoulder. He had to get surgery, and he says he drinks every day now. He just drinks because it's his medicine. In the end, his biggest regret isn't even volunteering. His biggest regret was getting there too late. So 43-year-old Kim Kwan-ong,
Eu acho que não tem agora a virar alcoólico.
Yeah.
he helped bring back 25 bodies. At one point, he lost consciousness during a dive, got swept away in the current, was saved, had to go to the ER for treatment. He stayed in the hospital for 3 days. The minute he got back out, he was back in the water. He went into places where the Coast Guard weren't even attempting to go, not even pretending like they were gonna go. He went to places the Coast Guard deemed too dangerous, and he brought back children in his arms. Do you know what the divers got in exchange for their contribution? Nothing. Okay, his only thing that he got, the only reason he did this was for the families of the victims. But his body was wrecked. He cannot dive anymore. He has mounting hospital bills. He has paralysis in his left thigh. The government refused to deem the 39 injured civilian divers during the search operations as wounded by righteous causes, which would allow them to get health benefits and not have medical bills. In fact, the government actually turned their back on volunteer divers. They tried to charge a few of them for negligence when a diver died.
Despesas médicas.
Então, é o que ela disse, alguns caras com dívidas.
Yeah,
à
eu vi.
vida.
Died during a mission.
fazia
They said, well, it's
nada.
because you other divers didn't check his equipment. In 2015, Kim testified about the trauma that he suffered from handling all the dead bodies during the rescue efforts. He said he cannot forget it. He will never forget it. And in 2017, he took his own life. His final text to his loved ones were, I'll see you in a better place in the next life. I'm sorry. Haechan Ferry Company, so this particular ferry, this Sewol, had a capacity of holding 90 vehicles. On that day, there were 124 cars and 56 trucks.
Wow.
None of them were properly secured. None of them were even tied down. They were just driven onto the cargo port and just left on park. Now, remember the ballast water that I was talking about? It's actually compartmentalized, the water. It's not just like one big water tub. It's like you have the left tub and the right tub. And then in between these two tubs, you have these pumps. So what happens is if the boat starts leaning to the left, you start pumping this water to the right tub, okay, to balance it out. The pumps were broken. The pumps were broken. That is, I can't even describe to you how bad that is. And not only that, there's like a mathematical equation to figure out how much ballast water is needed to offset the cargo weight. In this case, the Sewol was carrying about 580 tons of ballast water. For the amount of cargo they had, they needed 2,000 tons of ballast water. They had a fourth.
Yeah, so it's completely off.
So off. Passenger Ku, a
Eles
survivor,
até
said
tinham
that
uma cena para equilibrar, quando estava estragada. E não tinha
E não
suficiente
tinha água
também.
suficiente, ou seja, nada servia.
passengers were trapped inside by windows that were very hard to break. He said he actually wanted to escape earlier, but those non-stop announcements kept telling him to stay put. He said the rescue was horrendous. We were all wearing life jackets. We all had time. If people had jumped into the water, they could have been rescued from the water. How do you even not have a loose plan on what to do in situations like this? That brings us to the company that owns the Sewol Ferry, Haechan Marine Company, that is controlled by a billionaire church leader founder Yoo Byung-eun's two sons. The ferry company was in financial ruins, and you know where they were cutting down on spending? It was not to give their shareholders money, it was in the training and safety department of employees and new hires. Prosecutors discovered that so much money was being funneled to the billionaire family, nothing was left for the actual company. Nothing was left to train the employees. The company was so starved of funds that they spent only $2 on the safety training for the Sewol's crew members. $2. You get hired, the company spends $2 to train you. And you know what that money was spent on? It was not an actual training. The $2 was spent to buy a fake paper certificate that said you are now qualified to be a crew member. You have done your safety courses. Life jackets, life rafts were left uninspected from the 90s. And the life jackets weren't even stored where they were supposed to be, which is on the upper decks or near evacuation points. They were stored in the passenger cabins. Crew members who worked for the company admitted in interviews they would have had no clue what to do in case of an emergency. They've never had an evacuation training or a drill. To put it in perspective how horrendous that is, the US Coast Guard regulations require passenger vessels to hold an abandoned ship drill and fire drill every single week. And it's not even like a hee hee ha ha we did it moment. You have to lower a lifeboat onto the water and start the engine of that lifeboat. That is the full drill. But that still doesn't explain
Então,
why.
nos Estados Unidos estão a dizer que há inspeções basicamente todas as semanas.
Todas as semanas
E tem,
fazem
metem no
treinamento,
barco
yeah.
e os outros supostamente nem tinham
papel.
isso.
Recebi papel só.
Não, o que eu quero dizer é que supostamente o barco nem isso tinha.
Sim.
O barco nem isso tinha. E há tipo. O treinamento deles era certificado fake.
Well, we have the overloading of the cargo, we have the ballast
Sewol.
water, but there's actually more. Because Haechan bought the Sewol Ferry from another company and modified it and added...
Basicamente ele modificou o barco quando comprou.
2 more levels on top to accommodate passenger cabins, which would bring in more money for them, raising up the center of gravity even more, making it extra top-heavy, which you don't want. They also underwent major renovations to create an art gallery, where you guessed it, they housed Mr. Yoo Byung-eun's art that he would sell to them at inflated prices.
In the boat?
In the boat, there was an art gallery with, also more weight was added because they added these marble slabs, thick marble slabs to showcase his work. And the company knew that what they were doing was dangerous. You can't even act like they were ignorant because it was discovered that between 2003 and 2011, Haechan had 5 crashes prior to the sinking of the Sewol Ferry. It was even recommended that their license be suspended or ferries after 2011. They were also asked in 2003 to stop using the Mangol channel because you don't know what you're doing in there. You guys were in an accident in there. But they continued to use it because it shaves off the precious 7 miles on the trip to Jeju, which is 7 miles of fuel that they're saving on. And so now, we know that Mr. Yoo Byung-eun's children, the billionaire kids, if you guys have watched the last episode, they were also in prison, and Mr. Yoo, the billionaire, was found suspiciously dead in his apricot orchard during the nationwide hunt for him immediately after this. Many more arrests were made. More than 150 regulators, crew members, ship inspectors, and officials were indicted, including the captain of the Sewol Ferry. He was charged with murder. And he said, I bow my head, and I just thought if people were leaving the ferry without the proper equipment, they would drown or drift away in the water.
Mas
So
lá
that's why he
embaixo
told
não
them to
iam
stay
afundar.
put.
Why the don't you stay put then?
Yeah, because he wasn't wearing a life vest when he was rescued, so why don't you stay put?
이런 지시를 받은 적이 있습니까?
기억이 없습니다.
With that much guilt and also public hate and scrutiny and a criminal trial, I would rather have died on the boat. So I just think it's so fascinating that some people have such a strong will to live that you would rather kill people to live. And there are actually a lot of more deaths that are associated with this that are not including like the 300 on board. A Navy officer was injured and passed away. An undying Marine named Mr. Lee passed away during a dive. He was actually diving when he just lost contact with everyone on surface. So his colleagues went into the water. He was found dead. Yeah, his air supply cords were tangled and he was unconscious without his diving equipment on. It's not really clear what happened. An x-ray of his
Não
chest
está o
showed no
equipamento todo direitinho e mesmo assim morreu.
Pelos vistos, enrolou-se e deve ter o ar.
irregularities, but a scan showed that his skull was filled with air. Now, a few weeks later, another civilian diver passed away. July of 2014, a helicopter from rescue operations crashed, killing all 5 officers on board and injuring a high school student. There was another death linked to the sinking that shocked a lot of people. The vice principal of Tanwon High School, Vice Principal Kang, he was found hanging from a tree near Chindo Island. So this is the island where all the parents had gathered, and it said that he was the leader of this school trip. He was in charge of the kids' safety. He was rescued, but over 250 of his students were not. He wrote in his note that he feels guilty and he wants to take responsibility for what happened. He wrote that the trip was his idea, and he cannot live without knowing where his students are. He wrote in the letter that
Não responsabilidade. Não é?
Sim, mas...
Não fez como os outros. E se calhar não tinha tanta responsabilidade como os outros. Ele era
Ele
diretor da escola.
Opa, ele deve ter pensado, escolhi a pior empresa que havia para mandar.
Se calhar por ser mais barata também.
he wonders if he could still be their teacher on the other side, in death. He asked his ashes to be scattered around where the ferry went down. Now, the sad part is, before his death, a lot of parents took their anger out on him, and so did a lot of Korean news media outlets, like a lot of adults. But when he passed, students and survivors alike, they went to his memorial in uniform and paid their respects and said he was an ethics teacher.
Então morreu também?
So I
Matou-se.
Não vi que ele se tinha matado.
Então como é que disseste que ele tomou responsabilidade? Achei que estavas a referir a ele ter-se matado.
Não, ele próprio disse que tipo, assumiu a culpa.
Ah, não, ele matou-se.
E o que é que eu ia dizer? Então,
E era um professor de ética, por isso é que tipo, foi mais para ele. Estás a perceber?
Sim, sim,
sabes
tá.
o que é ética, não é?
Por isso é que coisa. Então primeiro, quando ele está vivo, mandava-lhe as culpas todas. E depois quando
Mas
ele morreu,
eram
era
os
muito dos pais. E depois quando ele for os filhos...
Sim, mas calhar os filhos
Sem
nunca
mamãe.
culparam, não é?
wonder if it was really hard for him. He was a good person and he really cared for students. I don't think anyone should be blaming him. After the memorial, the hearse carrying his body circled around the school one last time. He was survived by his wife and 3 children. At least 3 parents have taken their own lives after losing their children in the Sewol Ferry. One of the fathers took his life on the 1-year anniversary of the Sewol Ferry tragedy. Many families have completely disintegrated, divorced, fallen into addictions, financial distress. One mom said, "You just have to cry when it's hard. There's no way around it. No one, nothing can console you or help you. When I miss my son, I go lie in his bed and I hug his pillows and I smell his smell and I cry." Many families have left their children's room exactly the way it is, not touching a single thing, almost as if these students are going to walk in through their door with their backpack. Most families hate spring. April is like the best season in South Korea. They hate it. One victim's mom said her husband, the victim's father, has these intense nightmares, and she said, "My husband constantly has nightmares, kicking his leg, even grabbing me by the collar, and one night when I hugged him, he just let out these screams, and he cried like a baby." So it's been very rough for these families, rescue personnel, but also the survivors. Survivors' guilt is a scary thing. I think it's confusing, how do you even process that type of emotion? There was a 71-year-old woman who was eating breakfast when she heard screaming. She saw people just sliding down the floor, so she grabbed a railing and saw everyone tumble like dominoes. She remembers going into shock, but this young man grabbed her arm and screamed, "Come on, hold on to me tightly." She was trying to let go and slide down with everyone because she was so exhausted. She's 71, but she's like, no, I can't hold on any longer. She said she was exhausted, but this young man never gave up on her and kept holding her arm. He grabbed her and pulled her up. He failed, so he pulled her up again, and this time it worked. He escorted her to the rescue boats, and she would not have made it out without him. She wanted to ask for his name, but it was so chaotic. He was just gone. Her 4 friends she was traveling with for this Jeju trip, her 4 friends died. She suffered a broken back, and she said, "I'm grateful. I want to thank that young man. I want to buy him a meal or at least hold his hand or give him a hug. What else can a lady like me do? But how could it be that an old woman like me survives and all these young people are still in there? It is such a shame." Civilians very early on realized that they were being lied to, so they tried to show their support to the parents with yellow ribbons. Even while news outlets are still lying, civilians tied yellow ribbons everywhere to show their support, to show parents, we know, and we are supporting you. A lot was exposed about high government officials when this case broke, like how President Park was unavailable for up to 7 hours during the initial incident, and when she decided she was sick of people calling her out for her vile, disgusting behavior, she said this about the Sewol tragedy. It's time to overcome the pains and hardship from the Sewol incident and move on to build a new
Well, that's
South
awesome.
Korea. We cannot stay trapped in the sadness and frustrations that have gripped us for the past year. At this point, bodies were still being recovered. Not everyone has been put to rest yet. She was later impeached for corruption. This is a big part of it. Her ratings dropped drastically after this. In the end, 9 bodies were still missing in the incident, and the parents stood by each other to make sure those victims came home to be laid to rest, which would ultimately lead to the Sewol being salvaged from the bottom of the seafloor, but it took a very long time to get there. Parents of victims gathered together in front of...
Agora como é preciso fazer? Se calhar nada.
Eu gostei da parte em que ela explica, acho que gostei a maioria. Basicamente, tipo, empresas mandar planos de como tirar o barco do fundo, estás a perceber? E o governo escolhia um dos planos. Ele recusou os três, acho que eram 3 planos. Passado um ano, vem com um plano exatamente igual a uma dessas empresas que tinham dado. E disse, nós somos tão espertos.
E encontraram um corpo quando tiraram o barco?
Acho que sim, não sei, aí deve dizer.
Francisco.
Já não tenho certeza. Eu editei este vídeo já há 10 meses, então já não tudo.
Government buildings to stage a hunger strike, not for money, but for the truth. They just wanted answers on how something like this could have happened. For months, the country mourned with them, and there's a moving story about a father who ate nothing but water and salt for 46 days. The president still had some supporters, super conservatives, that came out to eat pizza and fried chicken in front of the parents who were hunger striking. One parent stated, "I don't need money, compensation, or trauma therapy. I just need the truth, please, that's all." And he formally bowed in front of lawmakers, begging for them to help. Families of victims even shaved their heads in public in a demonstration. They just wanted to put their family members to rest, and the government just kept asking, "So you want compensation? No, we want you to find our family members." Finally, the ferry was salvaged 3 years later. There were 9 missing passengers at that point, and only partial remains would be found in the salvaging. Many of the victims were put to rest 1,000 days after the tragedy. But by the end of October 2018, 5 people are still missing. 2 16-year-old students, a 57-year-old teacher, a 48-year-old father, and the 7-year-old boy. Remember the older brother of the 6-year-old sister? They are still missing. The families of all the victims would receive approximately $177,000 for each victim lost, which is absolutely nothing. I mean, first of all, they didn't even want it in the first place, but it's absolutely nothing. 71 days after this... And before the tragedy, the sophomore class of Tanwon had 325 students. Now there were 75 in that class. All 75 were provided group therapy as part of the class time. 10 counselors were brought in to be readily available. And students at Tanwon said, "Every student here knows someone who has died or has gone missing." Like, just imagine the depth, like the web of trauma left behind. One student says, "Our school feels so empty now, it's not an environment where we can study. I wake up every morning hoping it's a lie, but it's not." And I will say that when tragedy does strike, Korea is a nation that at least the civilians come together. The government, wow, but the civilians do come together. In honor of the Sewol tragedy, all K-pop groups, every single one, stopped the release of all new music and promotions. The whole entertainment industry was at a standstill. Most industries in South Korea were at a standstill. There were no ads, no promotions for anything. And once the mourning period was over, BTS came back with a song called Spring Day, directly inspired by Sewol. The translated lyrics read, "I miss you even though I'm looking at your photo. Time is a cruel thing. I want to go to the other side of the earth holding your hand. How long do I have to wait? How many nights do I have to pass to see you, to meet you? Until spring day comes again, until the flowers bloom again. Please stay here a little longer." Another K-pop artist dedicated his concert to a fan that had purchased tickets to be there, but she passed on the Sewol Ferry. Shin Young-jae, of 4 men, finished and produced a song called "You Whom I Love," and the song was written by one of the teenagers that passed on the Sewol. His name is Lee Da-eun, and he wanted to be an artist one day. He plays the guitar, he writes his own lyrics, and his idol, his role model in life was Shin Young-jae. The lyrics translated are, "To you who has suffered so much, you went through a lot, right? I want to hold you in my arms, and right now I hope you're dreaming sweet dreams. But we're sleepless at night thinking of you. I wish you could relax, but just know that I will always be here with you, right next to you." Many artists and idols wore yellow ribbons during performances to honor the victims. But I will end the very long video with this. A family member of one of the victims was asked, why do you think this happened? Why do you think the kids weren't saved? And he said, people ask that all the time. Why do you think they failed to protect the children? And I think above all, they just had no desire to protect the children. Golden time? All they did was lie. What are your thoughts on this case?
Porquê ficou amarelo a cor? Por ser primavera? Tipo...
Não sei. Escolher.
É que ela não explicou isso, acho eu, não?
Não, esse no vídeo também não explica.
Será que agora com 10 anos, vais agora 10 anos, vão fazer alguma coisa?
Faço a mínima. A cena é que tipo, eu acho que ela no vídeo original não fala, ou eu gostei, já não lembro, me disse isto há muito. Mas basicamente, por exemplo, os BTS nunca disseram que a música foi sobre isso, porque o governo tem tipo uma blacklist de todos os artistas que apoiam os sobreviventes e que apoiam o que aconteceu, estás a perceber?
Mas qual é o sentido do governo fazer isso?
Oprimir, sei lá, nunca é que se fala do assunto.
É que é só saber.
Queres esquecer
vocês
tudo?
têm que concordar que a nossa forma de agir e que nós agimos bem e nós é que estamos bem.
E
quem sobreviveu é que está mal. É isso?
Não.
Quando é que foi lançada a música?
Quando é que foi?
Yeah.
Há 7 anos? 12 de Fevereiro. Oh! Oh! Faz hoje?
Yeah.
Hoje é dia 12 de Fevereiro. What the fuck? Tipo, esta música é muito
Deep.
adorada. É muito adorada pelos coreanos. Tanto que eu acho que ela nunca saiu dos charts. Estes anos todos. Dos charts. Tipo... Basicamente, das teorias aqui é que nesta cena havia um sobrevivente e que está tipo a sentir-se culpado, estás a ver? E que está tipo a tentar se matar.
No início até pensei que tinha que ser um acidente de comboio.
Tu vais cair! Mas se tu reparares, o barulho foi do barco, não foi do comboio. Anda para trás, estás a ver o que é que diz ali no coice do João Pedro?
Sabes que isto aqui é tipo o lema do Liverpool?
Exato. Basicamente, soubeste que o que aconteceu com os fãs do Liverpool?
Então.
Pronto, foi algo parecido, que também foi negligência de outros. Sabes a história?
Você foi a bancada, caiu e tudo.
Não foi isso.
Não foi, mas eu sei também qualquer coisa.
Foi tipo, havia um jogo entre o Liverpool e outra equipa e eles não queriam tipo, juntar as fãs para não haver problemas, então os fãs do Liverpool eram muito mais do que os fãs do outro e ficaram num espaço muito mais pequeno e eles não estavam a controlar quem é que entrava, então entrou demasiada gente e as pessoas começaram a morrer sufocadas.
E a bancada caiu e eles morreram esmagados numa sequência.
Mas não foi só por causa da bancada cair.
Mas eu acho que morreram no 90 e tal, se não me engano.
Sim, no 96, acho.
Foi. É a mesma cena.
E pronto, e a polícia tipo, não os deixava sair para dentro do campo, mas as pessoas estavam a morrer lá, pronto. É parecido, estás a ver? E alguns sobreviventes, se não me engano, juntaram-se com sobreviventes do Liverpool e tipo até tiraram fotos com os lemas e tudo, estás a ver? Por isso, está ligado lá.
Será que eles trocaram tipo um navio por um comboio no videoclipe para não ser tão descarado?
Talvez. Porque o som é do navio. Eu tirei do vídeo. Já não sei, mas tipo, os pais depois foram pôr os sapatos dos filhos à beira da. Também pode ter uma dessa. Ali diz Don't Forget, que era tipo o que muitos bebês diziam.
Sei que é como se fossem as roupas deles.
Eu acho que um artista fez uma arte igualzinha assim para representar pronto, as pessoas. E aqui tem umas coisinhas amarelas. Lembras que eles falaram?
Sim, sim.
Eu lembro-me agora, eu acho que a cena do comboio é por causa do filme Snowpiercer. Queriam um foco de neve entrar no comboio. E eu percebo que o mundo não pode ter congelado, que senão não existia focos de neve. Basicamente. E eles falam do filme, do nome do filme Snowpiercer aí. E se calhar o comboio foi por isso. E tipo, eles tiveram muitos anos mesmo, sem cantar esta música. Sabes quando é que eles começaram a cantá-la de novo?
Também não.
Quando houve o Covid, na quarentena, eles cantaram bué esta música.
Que é para mim já também morrer com o vídeo.
Ou por ser tipo uma música, sei lá. Não sei, mas pronto.
Mas até a melodia da música parece que é pesada mesmo, tipo.
Mas se calhar se nunca
E até na
tivesse
voz,
contado, nunca ias.
Não, tipo, eu associava que era uma música depressiva, estás a ver? Porque tipo, dá para ver pelo clipe em si e até a voz deles, tipo, não tem assim. Tipo, dá para perceber uma. É assim, um estilo voz mais melancólica, estás a ver? E pronto. Acho que dá para perceber pelas músicas, tipo, nem preciso perceber a letra, mas tipo, se a música é depressiva, mais alegre e essas cenas, estás a ver? 2.200 pessoas, 1.500 morreram.
Ou seja,
E outras 350 não foram encontradas. Não. E 340 a boiar, estás a ver? É quase a mesma coisa.
E imagina,
E olha os teus.
como é que no Titanic, em que era muito mais difícil de sobreviver, de conseguir resgatar pessoas, e ainda assim teve a mesma porcentagem de sobreviventes num barco que afundou tão perto de terra, em águas calmas. Não tem lógica, eles se quisessem, eles tinham mesmo resgatado as pessoas.
Não, dá para ver aqui que era bem da perto.
Por isso, apesar do Titanic também ter sido responsabilidade, depois eles tentaram resolver tudo.
Olha, aqui
não,
ainda aparece
foi...
9 desaparecidos.
Aqui não, aqui foi responsabilidade do início ao fim.
Yeah.
Foi tipo, eles podiam ter feito merda no início, mas depois ter tentado salvar, não, foi até ao fim dos filhos.
Se calhar o Titanic também fala muito mais porque era muito mais gente.
Oh, sim.
Que era a maior barco do mundo e tal.
Eram números muito maiores, mas mesmo assim eu acho que tipo, quase ninguém sabe disto e é estúpido, eu acho que mais não devia saber.
Se calhar o governo deles também quis ocultar um bocado, não é?
Que apesar de tudo é uma tragédia enorme e é minha responsabilidade.
Yeah. Ela também estava a amarela, será que foi por causa disso?
Se calhar. E tinha uns lacinhos.
Yeah.
Logo? Não. Ai meu
Está
Deus.
com boi.
Eu tenho uma vida muito cansada. Tu adoras, eu não adoras?